Good evening. It is Wednesday. It is 5-ish, and so it is time for Live at 5. Welcome. So this week, the question that we are going to be asking is, and answering, is how will I know that I am in labour? I love this question, and it's one that I get asked a lot. How will I know? How will I know that my labour is starting? What signs will I have? And it's a really good question, because most of us, when we're thinking about our labour starting, or talking about other people's labours, or thinking about other people's labours, often what we share as our birth stories is the active labour, the established labour, and the birth. We don't talk about the early bits, the early signs. You know, how will I know? I've gone through all my pregnancy, but when does my labour begin, and how will I know that it has begun? A lot of us have only television to go on, and you know, if you look at films or soaps or anything that's on television, it's almost formulaic. You know, your labour suddenly starts with your waters going in the middle of the most embarrassing place ever. It's a tsunami and everybody else knows about it. And on those programmes and in those films, it almost follows a complete pattern. You know, at that point where the waters have gone in the middle of nowhere, then everybody is running around like headless chickens. It's an emergency, ambulance are being called, hot water's being found, hot towels. What do we need those for? All of those different things. And most of us, we have this expectation that when labour starts, it suddenly starts and it all comes on in one big go. So what I want to talk about today is the reality of early labour, how we know, what signs you might notice, so that you're not waiting for this big dramatic Hollywood style beginning to your labour. So at the end of pregnancy, before we even notice that labour is beginning, we might have some behavioural shifts in ourselves. So you might have heard of something called nesting. And this is almost our biological desire to get our birthing areas and space ready. So we sometimes have a shift in what we're wanting to do and how we're feeling about things. So this might manifest itself with suddenly being really keen on cleaning everything. And maybe even if you're not a clean freak, you might find yourself wanting to clean weird things like your skirting boards, or, you know, scrubbing your front step and things that you'd never normally do. It might manifest itself with wanting to get your hospital bag packed, or your nursery just so, or washing the baby clothes that maybe you've bought. So you might find yourself wanting to do those tasks, and it's a sort of shift, wanting to create your space, get everything ready so that you can then prepare for labour. So you might have that behavioural shift. You might have some physical shifts in your body as well. So things like you might feel a bit sick, might actually be sick, or you might have a runny tummy. Now, the reason that this sometimes happens is that our body almost has a bit of a clear out before we go into labour, as in, you know, full proper labour, because our body doesn't want to focus on too many things at once, and so we have this clearing out. Now, if you are eating curries, trying to encourage your labour, sometimes you miss this bit because you just think that maybe you've eaten something a bit dodgy, and you've just got an upset stomach. So just be aware that that could be a sign of early labour. Again, as you will have seen in some of my other videos, even if you do notice that you're going into labour, you don't have to do anything. Labour is an involuntary process, and all of these things are going to happen whether you do stuff or not. So those are some of the other things that you might find. You might find that you're a little bit more achy, or you've got a bit of backache, or, you know, a few twinges here and there, or you might not. And this is the other frustrating thing about labour. no two labours look the same. So you might have some of these things or you might not. And even if you've had 9 babies before and this is your 10th pregnancy, your labour this time might be completely different from your other previous labours. So some of these things are things you might notice. Now, another thing that can happen is that you can have a show. Now, sometimes people go, I've heard about this show, but what does it mean? Do we suddenly feel like we want to be using jazz hands? What is this show? So, if you've watched any of my videos about the physiology of birth, you will know that during pregnancy, our cervix, the round muscles that are going around the uterus, so if you imagine your uterus as a balloon, you've got circular muscles that go all the way around, and those muscles concentrate towards the lower end of the uterus and they hold our cervix nice and tightly closed like a clenched fist. And the first thing that happens when we go into labour and this early labour stage is that those round muscles relax. And so the hold on the cervix relaxes a little bit. Now during our pregnancy, in that cervix there is a mucus plug. So it is a globule, for want of a better word, of mucus that is there in the neck of the cervix. And the idea is that it collects anything that's, trying to get in and flushes it out. It's there as a level of protection. But it's there in that cervix that is nice and tightly clenched. Now, if those round muscles relax, then the hold on that cervix relaxes and releases, and therefore sometimes that plug of mucus can come away, and that is our show. Now, sometimes it comes away in one big blob. You will notice that. It is there often in your knickers towards the end of pregnancy, and it's this blob of mucus. Yes, I'm talking about the contents of our knickers, and this is why we generally don't share it, because in polite conversation it's not really the done thing to talk about the contents of our knickers. But yeah, we can have this blob of mucus. Now, when we have a cold, we get mucus in our nose, and it's kind of similar. The mucus plug that we have is often a bit more globular, so it looks a little bit more gelatinous, but it's very similar to the mucus that we have when we have a cold. And now sometimes when you've got a cold, it's really thick and gloopy, and sometimes it's kind of loose and watery, and that's similar to that blob of mucus as well. So it can be clear, it can be pink, it can be red, it can be brown, it can be sort of gelatinous but look like it's got little blood vessels in it as well. So there's all of these different variations of normal, and that is absolutely fine. If you're concerned though, always talk to your midwife or your caregiver if you've got any questions about it, or if you're worried about it, or if it's got a funny smell at all, then get checked out. But there are lots of different variations of normal. But it's just this plug of mucus coming away. Sometimes it comes away in one big blob. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it comes away a bit more gradual. And so, gradually even. And so sometimes we don't even notice that our plug is coming away because we just wipe it away as we go to the toilet, or it comes away as we go to the toilet. So again, you might notice it, or you might not notice it. But if you do notice it, you don't need to do anything. Again, as long as you haven't got any concerns and it hasn't got a funny smell or it's not a funny colour, that's just a sign that your labour is imminent. The other irritating thing is that we can't just say, right, once you've seen your plug, then it's going to be X number of hours before your labour starts, because that can come away a couple of days before your labour begins, sometimes even up to a week, especially if you're having a stretch and sweep, which can dislodge that mucus plug. Sometimes that isn't actually the start of your labour at all, and our body will reform it. In the same way, when you have a cold, you don't just blow your nose once and that's it. That would be handy, wouldn't it? But if it's not meant to come away just yet, then it will reform. There will be more mucus that is formed and creates another plug there. But if this is your natural labour and that plug comes away, it could signal the signal. I can't talk this evening. It could signal that your labour is about to start or is starting, or it could be that it's going to happen soon. So that's our plug. So then the next thing that people tend to ask about is, what about waters? Yeah, your waters are going to go. And this is another regularly asked question, which is, do waters always have to go before labour starts or when your labour starts? And the simple answer is no. So about 10% of waters go before labour starts. So in 10% of pregnancies, the waters will go as a first sign of labour. But that means that there's a huge number of pregnancies that do not end with the waters breaking as the first noticeable sign of labour. And again, this is another thing that we see regularly in the media, in films and dramas, the waters going as the first sign and everybody else knowing about it. And for a lot of parents that I've taught historically, this is a source of anxiety. I've had some mums who haven't left the house towards the end of pregnancy because they're so worried about their waters going and it being really noticeable and embarrassing. So when our waters, let's have a think of what the waters are. The waters are surrounding the baby during pregnancy. The baby is in the membranes, which is this sort of complete sac around the baby, and the waters are in there. Now, during our pregnancy, those waters thermoregulate, so they keep our baby at a constant temperature. So whether we're in the Sahara Desert or the North Pole, our baby is kept at a constant temperature, which is just amazing, really. It also is a sterile environment. So this little sac that our baby swims in means that, the baby is in this little place that no bugs are going to, or germs are going to get to that baby. They also allow the baby movement. So baby is practicing all of the different movements that it's going to do outside of the womb, in a safe cushioned area. And it protects the baby. It is like if you bump your belly, then baby is cushioned. And during the labour as well, having those waters intact protects the baby from the pressure of those surges. And the more that we learn about the physiology of birth, the more we realise that that is actually a really beneficial thing that baby has during labour, is the waters surrounding them. So with that in mind, sometimes waters go beforehand. Like I said, about 10% of the time waters go beforehand. And as those waters go, there's generally a downward flow of those waters. And as that downward flows happen, the baby comes down as well and forms a plug. So yes, you might have a little initial gush of water, but then as the baby's head comes down, it works as a plug. So then you might not find that there is this, constant gush, because baby's head is now sort of blocking that way. Or if you've got a breech baby, so your baby's the other way around, the bottom can form that plug as well. So you might feel that you've got this little gush of water, but then actually it is stemmed, and so it's very unlikely that you're going to have this tsunami effect. So when baby's waters do go, or when the waters do go, you might find it's a little bit of a gush and you are likely to notice it, but it's very unlikely that the rest of the world will. But about like I said, the 10% go beforehand. The rest of those waters will go at some point during labour. And sometimes they don't go at all. So sometimes babies are born in their sac. So they come out in their entire sac, which is just incredible to see. So we can, if you fancy looking at this, if you go and have a look at YouTube or Instagram, you can find babies being on call, being born on call in the sac, and it is just amazing. We don't see that very often these days because of the amount of interventions that we have, and during labour often if things are not moving at a particular pace, it is often suggested then or recommended that they break the waters. But we want to be thinking, as we say with every video, benefits and risks. Why haven't the waters gone by themselves? Maybe there is actually a benefit to those waters being intact. And that could be to do with that sterility. It could be to do with the thermoregulation. It could be to do with baby's manoeuvrability. So maybe baby knows it hasn't quite moved into the ideal position just yet. And being surrounded by its waters means that it can move into that space, into that ideal position for the baby in a more easy fashion. So some waters will go during labour and others will not, and that is all variations of normal and absolutely fine. So waters going is another big one. Then another sign of early labour, or that your labour has started, is your surges, or are your surges. So your tightenings, your contractions, those sensations. Now, for many people who've used hypnobirthing, sometimes if you haven't noticed your plug going, or if you haven't noticed, your waters haven't gone, which is the vast majority of us, and the first sign that you're in labour is your surges, or are your surges, most parents don't even notice that their surges have started, because you have these sensations towards the end of pregnancy anyway. You have your practice surges. And sometimes you don't realise when your practice surges have become your real surges. And it's not until you look back on it and you go, oh yeah, that was when it started, that you realise. Now, for some people, you might be thinking, well, isn't that really, nervous? That would make me really nervous if I didn't realise my labour had started, because then I'd just carry on as normal. But actually, that's exactly what you want to do. In this early stage of labour, you don't need to do anything for labour to happen. This is why people in comas are able to give birth, because it's an involuntary motion of their body. Our body wants to expel our baby, so we don't have to do anything for that to happen. So if your first signs of labour are your surges, you may not notice it and you'll carry on as normal, and that's absolutely fine. And that's the ideal situation to be in. Now, sometimes parents say to me, well, what do the practice surges feel like? How will I know? What are they? So sometimes, if you think about it, when your baby is moving around, sometimes it feels like baby's doing this against part of your belly, or sometimes your whole belly goes really hard. That is generally our practice surges. It's not necessarily our baby is moving or pushing, but that sensation, that is often our practice surges. And towards the end of pregnancy, you might notice those more regularly, more often. And that is very similar to those sensations that you might get when your labour is actually beginning. You might get sensations in your back. You might get some sort of period-like sensations as well. And all of these are likely to be signs that your labour is getting ready. Now, the last little thing that I want to talk about here is something that I call starty-stoppy labour. Technical terms, starty-stoppy labour. And this is where sometimes you're sitting in the evening and you're watching the telly, just having a relax, and you find that you're getting these sensations. Sometimes those sensations come down into quite a regular pattern. You might find that as the evening draws on, they're coming every 5 minutes or so. And you start thinking, ooh, this is exciting. Now, if it comes round to bedtime, go to bed. A lot of people don't. go to bed, you might find that actually they all stop. And that is a little bit disappointing because all of us are excited and impatient to meet our babies towards the end of pregnancy. But go to bed. If it's your labour, you're not going to sleep. But sometimes what happens is everything fizzles out when you go to bed and you think, oh, I thought that was my labour. Oh well, but you get some rest. And then you might find the same thing happens, or a similar thing happens the next evening. You know, you're watching telly or just relaxing or doing whatever you do in the evening, and you find that these sensations are coming again. And you think, ooh, here we go, exciting times. Yes, but it comes around to bedtime and you go to bed and it all fizzles out again. And again, it is a little bit disappointing because we think, oh, I thought my labour was starting. But you get some rest. The third night, same thing happens. You go to bed, but this time, no, it's not fizzling out. And actually, it's your real labour. And your labour progresses and you have a baby. Yay! Now, the reality of it, I've taught so many midwives who back me up on this, and this is where I got it from, who say the first night people don't go to bed. They don't go to bed, they think that their labour has started, and then they carry on doing stuff, and they get on their birthing ball and they bounce, they go for a walk, they do all sorts of things, and they keep those sensations coming throughout the night. But then as the sun comes up in the morning, everything fizzles out. Now, it doesn't matter how much you try to get sleep during the day. It's not quite the same, is it? So you've now got one night, no sleep. The second night, similar thing happens. You think, right, gonna make it happen this time. You get a curry, you have some sex, you walk up and down the stairs, you bounce on your ball, you do all sorts of things to keep it going all evening. But then as the sun comes up in the morning, everything fizzles out again. Now you've had 2 nights no sleep, and then the third night where things really do kick off, you're exhausted, you're so tired, and then you need support through that labour because you've got no resources left. So this can happen and does happen very, very regularly. Your body sometimes gets a little bit of a practice. It starts going, okay, this is what we're going to be doing, but we're not quite ready yet. And this is what we're going to be doing, but we're not quite ready yet. You don't have to do anything to make labour happen. It'll happen anyway. So, by all means, enjoy your time sitting on your ball and enjoy those sensations. That's absolutely fine, but you don't have to do anything to make that labour happen. So if it comes round to bedtime, go to bed. You're not going to sleep all the way through your labour. I did have one mum who slept until an hour and a half before she had her baby. And that was absolutely fantastic for her. She loved it. But you're not going to pull the duvet back in the morning and go, oh look, we had a baby in the night. You will not sleep through your body birthing your baby. But you can get rest. So listen to your body. That is the key thing. Rest and listen to your body. So those are some of the signs that you might find that happen towards the end of pregnancy to signify that your labour is happening. So there are the behavioural things, so the nesting, there's the physical things. You might find that you have a clear out in preparation. You might notice that your mucus plug has come away, that you have your show, or you might not. Your waters might go. Not many do go before labour starts, but you might. And if it does happen, it's not going to be like telly. There is likely to be an initial gush perhaps, but not necessarily this ongoing tsunami. But for many of you, your waters will go at some point during labour, and maybe not at all. You might have your baby born on call in this sack. And then you've also got those surges, the contractions. So they might start out as practice ones. They might be mild to begin with. They're likely to become stronger and closer together. But you don't have to do anything for that to happen. That is your body working beautifully as it should. It will happen when your body is ready. So rest, listen to your body. I hope you found that helpful. If you would like more information, this is the sort of thing that we cover in our hypnobirthing course. So as well as looking at breathing and relaxation, we look at the physiology, we also look at the timeline of labour, so what labour might look like and how you can use the skills and the techniques that we learn during our hypnobirthing course for the birth of your baby. I have got online courses coming up. I have relocated to Wales, so if you're in South Wales and you want to do a face-to-face class, I have got spaces at the moment for one-to-ones, private courses where I will come to you, and I have also got group classes starting up in the new year in Carmarthen and the surrounding area. So if you fancy knowing a bit more about hypnobirthing, my courses, the classes are available to you, get in touch. So that's the end of our Live at 5 this week. I look forward to your questions. If you've got any more questions about anything I've spoken about this week, let me know and we can add it to next week's Live at 5. Thanks for joining me. Take care. Bye.